You will think differently if I tell you that a man never truly forgets the woman who has met herself. He may forget her words, her scent, the way she used to tilt her head when she laughed, but the memory of her essence, the vibration of her self-knowledge, lingers like an imprint on his soul. Because a woman who knows herself does not love from hunger, she loves from fullness. She is not reaching out to be completed, she is extending herself as an offering of wholeness, and that changes everything. The man who meets such a woman encounters not a reflection of his fantasies, but a mirror of his unconscious. Her presence draws out what he has buried, the fears, the inadequacies, the shadows he thought were long forgotten. And while he may be enchanted by her grace, it is her depth that unnerves him. She awakens him not through her charm, but through her stillness, not through pursuit, but through the silent awareness that says, I am already enough. Jung once said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. When a woman knows herself, she becomes that alchemical catalyst. She does not need to chase transformation, it happens simply because she is it. Her groundedness disturbs the illusions that men construct around themselves. She is the feminine principle in its highest expression, receptive yet powerful, tender yet unyielding. The man, accustomed to being needed, suddenly finds himself unnecessary. And that, paradoxically, is what makes her unforgettable. To the unconscious man, she feels like a mystery he cannot decode. She is water, reflective, deep, and beyond containment. He tries to define her, to capture her in language or possession, but every attempt slips through his grasp. Her energy cannot be owned because it does not seek validation. She does not orbit around his moods or his need for control. She moves according to her own rhythm, guided by something far older and truer than approval. There is a quiet authority in the woman who has confronted her shadow. She no longer hides behind performance or pleasantry, she has faced the parts of herself that society taught her to suppress, her anger, her desire, her intuition, her independence. She has walked through the inner labyrinth where many fear to go and emerged whole, luminous, unashamed. Such a woman no longer negotiates with her worth. She embodies it. And that embodiment unsettles a man who still seeks his reflection in her submission. When he looks into her eyes, he sees not flattery, but truth. She does not inflate his ego, she exposes it. Her love does not rescue, it reveals. It shows him where he hides, what he avoids, what he projects onto her. And for a moment, terrifying and sacred, he sees himself naked, stripped of pretense. He sees the boy inside him who still fears rejection, who confuses attention with love. And in that moment, he realizes she has never belonged to him, she belongs to the vastness within herself. Men often confuse unforgettable with unattainable, but this is not about games or distance. The woman who knows herself is not playing hard to get, she simply refuses to abandon herself. Her boundaries are not walls, they are sacred lines drawn in self-respect. Her silence is not absence, it is a mirror. Her detachment is not cruelty, it is clarity. She loves, but she does not lose herself in love. She gives, but she does not bleed for validation. She walks beside, not behind. When such a woman leaves a man's life, she doesn't storm out, she fades like dawn retreating into day. There are no dramatics, no pleas. Just an energy shift, subtle yet irreversible. He may wake months or years later, haunted not by what she did, but by what she represented, the wholeness he glimpsed but did not claim. He will remember the way she made him feel, not adored, but seen. And that, for many men, is more terrifying than rejection. Because to be seen by a conscious woman means there is nowhere to hide. She sees beyond masks, beyond bravado. Her intuition reads energy like text, her empathy pierces armor. The man who meets such a woman faces a choice, awaken or retreat. Some retreat, too frightened to face the inner work she silently demands. Others, if brave enough, begin to peel away the layers of illusion, to meet their own shadow, to step into the same light she stands in. But whichever path he chooses, he will never be the same. The echo of her awareness will follow him in silence, like a soft voice reminding him of the man he could have become. And that is why he never forgets her. She did not enchant him with beauty, but with presence. She did not promise to heal him, but to mirror him. She did not complete him, but reminded him that he was incomplete, and that truth, though painful, is the beginning of transformation. In the months after she's gone, something begins to stir within him, an ache that no new affection can soothe. He tries to fill the silence she left behind with distractions, with other faces, with movement, but her energy remains, not as nostalgia, but as a haunting awareness. Because she was never just a woman, she was an awakening disguised as love. And awakenings do not vanish when they end, they echo in the soul until integration happens. What he misses is not her presence but the mirror she held up to his unconscious. She was the first to stand before him without bending to his illusions, the first to reflect back the truth of who he was, both in his brilliance and in his brokenness. Most people seek comfort in relationships, she offered revelation. And that revelation, once seen, cannot be unseen. In Jungian terms, she activated the anima within him, the inner feminine that connects a man to his emotional world, his intuition, his capacity for empathy and depth. Most men resist that awakening because it threatens the dominance of the ego, which thrives on control, logic, and external validation. But when the anima stirs, the man begins to feel more, sense more, dream more. He becomes porous to the unseen dimensions of his own psyche. This is why such a woman feels dangerous. She opens the gates of his inner world, and once open, they cannot be shut. He remembers her not because she fed his ego, but because she challenged it. She was not afraid of his silence, his moods, or his walls. She could sit in stillness while he raged against his own reflection. Her calm was not submission, it was sovereignty. She didn't rush to fix him, because she understood something most people don't, that healing cannot be forced upon those who are not ready. Instead, she allowed him to meet his own pain, to face the abyss within. In doing so, she became both the light that revealed it and the darkness that contained it. To love a woman who knows herself is to be confronted by the question, who are you without control? Many men have built their identity around being needed, admired, or obeyed. But she doesn't need saving, admiring, or controlling. She invites partnership, not possession. And for a man who has defined his worth through domination or validation, this can feel like death. Because, in truth, it is the death of ego's illusion. Yet within that death lies the seed of something new. If he is brave enough to stay, to breathe through the discomfort, to resist the urge to reduce her to something manageable, he will begin to understand that she is not against him, she is for his evolution. Her boundaries teach him respect. Her self-awareness teaches him reflection. Her independence teaches him the art of love without attachment. And slowly, he learns that intimacy is not built on control, but on freedom. Still, few men choose this path. It demands humility, presence, and a willingness to dissolve what is false. Many retreat, searching for women who will soothe rather than awaken them, who will mirror their ego instead of their essence. But deep down, he knows it's an illusion. Because once a man has tasted the energy of a woman rooted in her truth, all others feel like echoes. Their beauty may please the eye, their warmth may comfort the body, but something essential is missing, the vibration of authenticity, the electric stillness of self-possession. He may not articulate it, but his body remembers her frequency. It's in the way his chest tightens when he meets someone who feels almost, but not quite, the same. It's in the dreams where she appears not as herself, but as an archetype, the muse, the priestess, the shadow. She becomes mythic in his memory, because she was never merely human to him, she was the symbol of what he's been unconsciously seeking, the union of love and truth. And this is the paradox that Jung understood so well, that what we admire in another is what we have yet to realize within ourselves. He was never really obsessed with her, he was drawn to what she awakened in him. She became the projection of his own unrealized wholeness. But when she withdrew, the projection collapsed, leaving him face to face with the void it once concealed. That's why she remains unforgettable. Because she didn't just leave him, she returned him to himself. Not the self he performs for the world, but the raw, unguarded self he hides behind achievement, status, and charm. She reminded him that no amount of conquest can replace the courage of inner work. And though he may not have thanked her for it, one day, perhaps years later, he will recognize that she was never the storm that destroyed him, but the mirror that revealed where his foundations were weak. He will remember her not as the woman who left, but as the moment his soul began to stir. There comes a point when he realizes that forgetting her is impossible, not because of longing, but because she became the threshold between who he was and who he could become. Every relationship after her becomes a quiet echo, a faint repetition of a melody he once knew but never learned to play. He doesn't crave her touch anymore. He craves the state of being she lived in, the serenity, the self-containment, the unshakable calm that seemed to rise from some invisible center within her. She was not dramatic, nor did she beg to be understood. She was clarity wrapped in mystery. And that is something a man cannot erase. Because when you meet someone who lives from the depths of their own consciousness, they awaken a knowing in you that cannot be undone. He remembers the way she moved through conflict without fear, the way she could hold silence without retreating into coldness. He remembers the softness in her tone that coexisted with unwavering certainty. She embodied what every unawakened man secretly fears and desires, the woman who does not need his permission to exist fully. In her presence, he had glimpsed a different kind of power. Not the power that dominates, but the power that is. A grounded, sovereign energy that requires no defense. It was the kind of power that ancient mystics described as feminine divinity, chaotic yet ordered, tender yet fierce. She embodied the paradox of life itself. And that is why she was unforgettable. She did not just love him, she reminded him of the sacred within himself. There is something profoundly unsettling about encountering wholeness in another. It forces one to confront their fragmentation. When he saw her act from integrity instead of fear, he had to acknowledge the places where he still compromised himself for approval. When he saw her speak truth even when it cost her comfort, he felt the weight of his own silence. When he saw her walk away instead of begging to be chosen, he faced the mirror of his own dependency. And though he could not name it then, he sensed that she was living in alignment with something greater, what Jung called the self, the organizing principle of the psyche that transcends the ego's games of power and validation. To be near her was to be invited into that same alignment. She did not preach it, she embodied it. And embodiment is the most dangerous form of teaching. It dissolves illusion simply by existing. No lecture, no demand, no manipulation, only presence. And that presence unsettled the false comfort of his ego. Because when faced with authenticity, everything built on pretense begins to tremble. She did not seek to change him, yet her mere existence forced transformation. Her love was not the kind that coddles, it was the kind that burns away the unnecessary. It was alchemical, turning pain into understanding, resistance into surrender. And he, though unprepared, became the vessel of that fire. Even after she left, its heat remained. In the quiet hours of solitude, he revisits the moments he misunderstood her. When he called her detached, she was setting a boundary. When he accused her of indifference, she was preserving her peace. When he said she was too much, it was because he was unwilling to expand. And the more he reflects, the more he realizes that her greatest act of love was leaving when staying would have meant abandoning herself. This realization does not come as regret, it arrives as revelation. Because the truth is, he never really lost her. What he lost was the version of himself that could not meet her there. He begins to see that she was not the storm that passed through his life, she was the compass that pointed him toward his own awakening. And as the seasons change, he starts to understand what she once lived by instinct, that love is not possession, but reflection. The woman who knows herself does not chain a man, she frees him from his illusions. But freedom is not always pleasant, it demands the dismantling of comfort, the dissolution of identity. He had to lose her to meet himself. And that is the quiet tragedy and triumph of such encounters, they break you open only to reveal what was always waiting beneath. In time, he no longer seeks to replace her. He begins, instead, to walk the inner path she once reflected. He reads the philosophers she quoted, listens to silence the way she used to, watches his own reactions like she once watched his, with compassion, but without rescue. And though she is gone, her essence remains, not as a wound, but as a guide. The memory of her becomes less about loss and more about remembrance, the remembrance of what love looks like when it flows from consciousness, not need. She has become, to him, a myth, not the fantasy of romance, but the symbol of integration. And like all true myths, she lives not in the mind, but in the soul. Every time he acts with integrity, every time he chooses depth over distraction, every time he sits with discomfort instead of fleeing, he honors her presence. She is no longer a person to miss, but a truth to live by. As the years unfold, the memory of her transforms from longing into initiation. What once felt like loss now feels like initiation into consciousness itself. He comes to see that she was never simply a chapter in his story, she was the axis upon which the story turned. Her departure was not abandonment, it was the sacred moment when life demanded that he begin the real work, the work of knowing himself. Because a woman who knows herself does not arrive to complete a man's journey, she appears to awaken it. Her love is not an ending, but a summons. And when she vanishes, she does not take love with her, she leaves behind the echo of responsibility. The responsibility to meet his own soul with the same reverence she carried for hers. In his solitude, he begins to feel what she once felt, the profound peace that arises when one stops chasing validation. He starts to understand that what she embodied was not arrogance, but balance. She did not move through the world to prove her worth, she moved because she was worth itself. This realization humbles him. For the first time, he sees how he mistook her self-respect for resistance, her calm for coldness, her silence for disinterest. Now he knows they were the language of self-possession. He studies the patterns of his past, the ways he confused attention for love, control for connection, and possession for safety. He begins to see that the hunger he once projected onto her was not a desire for partnership, but a longing for integration. She merely mirrored the forgotten parts of himself, the tenderness he repressed, the vulnerability he feared, the inner feminine he exiled. This is the essence of the Jungian path. What we seek in the other is what we have yet to reconcile within ourselves. The woman who knew herself was never a mystery to be solved, she was the embodiment of his own unconscious longing. And as he learns to sit with that truth, something softens in him. The resentment dissolves, replaced by gratitude. He no longer needs her presence to feel alive, because he has begun to access the same wholeness within his own being. Still, he remembers her not with nostalgia, but with reverence. She was the first to teach him that love is not chaos, it is consciousness. Not attachment, but awareness. He remembers her eyes, not for their beauty, but for the way they saw through him, straight into the part of him he had hidden even from himself. She did not punish his shadow, she illuminated it. And illumination, once received, cannot be undone. He begins to embody her lessons without trying to. He pauses before speaking, listens more deeply, moves with purpose rather than urgency. The frantic need to be seen fades, replaced by a quiet assurance that being is enough. This is the transformation she initiated, not a change of behavior, but a shift of essence. And in that shift, he finally understands what she had known all along, that peace is not found in possession, but in presence. When he meets new women now, he no longer projects. He sees them as they are, not as vessels for his unmet needs. He doesn't chase or perform, he simply shows up, whole and curious. The old patterns of control and withdrawal lose their power, because the part of him that once sought validation has been met. The woman who knew herself taught him this without words, through her unwavering commitment to her own truth. He realizes, perhaps for the first time, that love is not a transaction but a transmission. It's not about finding someone to fill your void, it's about sharing the overflow of your fullness. She loved him from that overflow, and that is why her love left a mark that no scarcity-based affection could replicate. It was never about her as an individual, it was about what flowed through her, awareness, integrity, depth. Now, when he thinks of her, he does not ache, he bows. Because her memory has become sacred, not sentimental. She represents the threshold he once resisted but now walks through freely, the passage from unconscious desire to conscious being. The more he honors that memory, the more he honors himself. And somewhere, far away, perhaps she too feels it, the subtle pulse of connection that transcends time and distance. Not as longing, but as recognition. Because when two souls meet in truth, the bond does not die, it evolves. She was never meant to stay, she was meant to awaken. And in doing so, she planted the seed of remembrance, that every man must, at some point, fall in love with a woman who knows herself, only to realize that what he truly sought was the reflection of his own forgotten depth. He will never forget her because she taught him how to remember himself. Over time, the lesson of her becomes a quiet rhythm in his life, subtle, persistent, transformative. He no longer speaks of her, yet she exists in everything he does. The way he listens without interrupting. The way he pauses before reacting. The way he chooses solitude without fear, understanding now that loneliness is not emptiness, it is communion with the self. She had lived like that, rooted in her own stillness, and now he understands why. When you know yourself, you are never truly alone. He begins to move through the world differently. The need to prove, to conquer, to be admired begins to dissolve, like mist in morning light. What once felt like ambition now feels like distraction. What once felt like victory now feels hollow without authenticity. Her memory taught him discernment, the difference between noise and truth, between desire and depth. He no longer chases pleasure for its own sake, he seeks meaning. And in that seeking, he begins to meet the man she saw in him, long before he could see himself. Because that is what conscious love does, it reveals potential. She had seen not the version of him that the world praised, but the one buried beneath his armor. She saw the boy still craving approval, the man still terrified of inadequacy, and she did not condemn him. She simply refused to collude with his illusions. Her refusal was an act of love, tough, pure, and uncompromising. And though it wounded his ego, it saved his soul. He often recalls the way she would look at him when he was angry or defensive, not with judgment, but with quiet knowing. That look said, "You can choose differently." He couldn't then. He needed to cling to the familiar pain of pride, of being right, of feeling superior. But now he understands that her silence was not withdrawal, it was invitation. She was holding the space for his evolution, even when he couldn't yet step into it. There is a sacredness in such restraint, and he only now grasps its magnitude. The woman who knows herself does not engage in battles of the ego. She does not need to prove her intelligence, her worth, or her power. She embodies them so completely that any attempt to defend them would feel like desecration. She is, simply, the embodiment of integration, the balance between love and boundaries, surrender and strength. And he, through her, learned that power does not roar, it resonates. It is often said that a man must lose what he values most to learn what truly matters. But this loss was not punishment, it was purification. Her absence stripped away his illusions, forcing him to see where he had mistaken intensity for intimacy, attraction for alignment. It revealed how easily he had confused possession with partnership. What she showed him, through both her presence and her departure, is that love without awareness is addiction, and awareness without love is isolation. She held both, and that balance remains the standard by which he now measures every connection. The men who have not yet met such a woman often believe they can live without depth. They chase novelty, validation, and fleeting victories. But once a man has encountered the energy of a woman rooted in her truth, the world can never quite seduce him in the same way again. He has seen too much. He has felt too much. The illusion of superficial comfort no longer satisfies. He craves what she embodied, consciousness woven with compassion, mystery wrapped in peace. He learns, slowly and painfully, that the journey toward wholeness is not about finding someone to love him as she did. It is about becoming the kind of person who can love as she did, with clarity, integrity, and freedom. He stops searching for her reflection in others and begins to build it within himself. He cultivates honesty even when it costs him admiration, vulnerability even when it feels unsafe, discipline even when the world tempts him toward distraction. Each act of self-honoring becomes a quiet tribute to her legacy. And somewhere along the way, the ache of her absence turns into gratitude. He no longer needs to hold onto her memory with longing because he carries her essence in the way he now lives. She is no longer a lost lover, she is a living archetype within him, the anima awakened, integrated, whole. Through her, he has touched what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who one truly is, beyond persona, beyond projection. And so, when people ask him about love, he does not speak of heartbreak or loss. He speaks of awakening. He speaks of the woman who did not stay, yet never left. He speaks of how her silence taught him to listen, how her absence became his mirror, how her truth became his compass. Because the woman who knows herself does not just pass through a man's life, she restructures it from the inside out. She dismantles his illusions, reveals his depth, and leaves behind a blueprint for consciousness. And when he finally lives from that blueprint, he realizes the paradox at the heart of all true connection, that the one who leaves may be the one who truly stays. The man she awakened will never again mistake validation for love, noise for meaning, or need for intimacy. He will remember her not with pain, but with peace. For in losing her, he finally found what she had found long ago, himself. The woman who knew herself was never his to keep. She was his to learn from. And in learning, he became free.